Met yet one-on-one, but I hope to do so after this meeting. But I'm the new strategist, Diane Vidmantis. I joined the HEC after a brief retirement from a 29-year career in industrial engineering and business operations. And as this is our first fully virtual meeting since last year, just a few reminders for folks. All of the materials were sent out via email yesterday and are available on the HEC Manufacturing Industry Consortium page online. We will put the link in the chat so that you have that. And as we go through the presentations, feel free to add your comments and questions to the chat. If there are any questions that are unanswered during the presentations, we'll follow up afterwards to make sure that you get an answer. So let's go ahead and get started today with hearing from our executive leadership team. And I'm not sure if Christy has joined yet. If not, we'll let Carly take it away.
All right. Welcome, everybody. As you can see, we have a very packed agenda today, so I'll try to make my opening remarks brief. But again, I just want to say thank you for taking the time today to log in. This will be a unique forum online, so I think that we have a really good and engaging presentation today. So yeah, I really wanted, if you want to go on to the next slide, talk a little bit about just kind of a look back at what our consortium has accomplished over the last couple of years. As you know, it's evolved a lot, kind of beginning with the Future Ready Oregon grants and allocating that money, but it really has now evolved into a higher purpose. I'm going to go to the next slide. Just to reiterate, the industry consortium and really all of them were established back a couple of years ago in 2022, which is now codified in Oregon law. It was originally Senate Bill 1545. And it really was a package of investments that work together to advance equitable workforce system solutions that support people with education, training, resources, and all the things that basically they need to get into good paying jobs. As we know, we have a lot of inequity in Oregon in terms of our income and wealth. And so really this committee is designed to address that, at least from the manufacturing sector, which I think we have such an amazing opportunity in the sector because we reach all groups of people, all skill levels, all education levels. It really is an accessible industry or sector in Oregon that has such potential to raise people up and share that wealth. So really, we have several purposes. First is catalyzing the innovation and co-investment that comes from, whether that's from the public sector, the private sector. We want to coordinate cross-sector action to make sure that we're not doing things in a vacuum, that the HEC's working on things and the colleges are working on things and industry is doing different things. And so the whole point is to bring us all together so that way we're rowing in the right direction. Third, of course, is advancing equity and talent development. I know that we all know from just our life experience, we tend to cluster with the people we know and stay in the groups we know. And we need to do better at dispelling that and breaking down the barriers and making sure that we are equitably providing these opportunities to all Oregonians. Fourth, one of our goals is to inform policy and funding decisions. We have such an amazing opportunity with this group of respected industry, education, community, and government leaders here that we really do have a great, strong voice now. And then, of course, leveraging sector expertise and not just checking boxes and going through the motions. So really, we've had a lot of really good progress and impact. First was really just the foundational work that started back in 2022. That was establishing the leadership team, the charter, and just setting the collective tone for how our group works, which I think has been really incredible. The Future Ready Oregon component of that, it informed priorities around for the third round of funding for the Future Ready Oregon grants. So of course, that is an important part of the things that we're working through and having good impact on. Recently, some employer focus groups were conducted. And of course, those are interested, so integral to all of this work because the employers are the ones who are actually creating the jobs and getting those folks employed. As you guys know, we've had some pretty great success with our occupational profiles. I've been so impressed with how that has evolved and what an amazing tool that is going to continue to be and serve, for just a variety of different resources and sectors there. And then lastly, just kind of going on the road, and there's been 2 on the road meetings in Redmond and Eugene, and we continue to go across the state and bring all of us together for that. So it's kind of a high level snapshot. And I did see Christy join. So Christy, I don't know if you wanted to add any other words into what we've been working on here with our group.
Um, Thank you, Carly, so much. I'm so sorry. I was supposed to do that part. No, that was great, and I'm just really looking forward to the next phase of all this work.
Thank you, Carly. Anyone else from ELT have anything they'd like to add today?
Words around the fact that this has been a great journey for the CBOs to be involved in this conversations. And I think we completed the original task. We've met all the components under that chart. And now it allows us to reset and create, the body of work that will move this work to be incorporated and normalize across the state as this work actually gets embedded into our ecosystem. So I'm pretty excited about what comes next.
And the only thing I would add to that is it's very rare that you have an opportunity to see kind of what the spectrum of need is and to act as the potential glue going forward. Most organizations, they have a set target. We've completed that, but now we can look at the system and say, okay, what role can we best play? And how do we do that in a way that allows others to perform their work even better? So I'm excited about the discussion today because it's really going to set our opportunity to be that. Not necessarily the centerpiece, but a critical element in keeping things connected.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and move on to a walkthrough of the agenda. So as Carly mentioned, it is packed today. And we've laid the foundation of what we're going to do, and let's go ahead and walk through some details. So after our standard agenda items of the consent agenda approval and any public comment, which I believe we don't have any, we will hear about Workforce Pell from Julia Pontoni. She's our director of the Office of Workforce Investment, affectionately known as OE. And I should remind everyone that we, within the Future Ready, are now part of the OE team. And then also within OE, we're going to hear from Jennifer Rice and learn about the local Workforce Development Board's manufacturing sector partnership work that they're doing, and they do quarterly reporting to the HEC. And then we also have Future Ready Oregon's Year 4 report from our Office of Research and Data Director, Dr. Amy Cox. And then we'll move into having our Business Oregon rep, Arthur Chaput, providing an update on the governor's prosperity roadmap. You can't have economic development without workforce development, vice versa. And then we'll have a short break, and we're hopeful that we can make that break longer. It's currently scheduled for 5 minutes, but we think we can make up a few more minutes in the front of this agenda. So we'll give you a little bit longer break. And then after the break, we'll have a few folks from the WTDB come in to give an update. They've had some changes within their leadership, and then they'll share more on Oregon employability skills. And this is a topic that was highlighted as a focus area by this consortium previously. So wanted to share that work as it relates to our strategic work plan. So all of those topics are relevant as we move into the discussion on the 2026 through 28 strategic work plan. So we do have a draft that was sent out. I'll talk a little bit about how it was put together and what flavored it, and then move into some small work groups to talk about and get feedback on that strategic work plan. That those will be led by our ELT. And then we'll come back and debrief and move into a brief legislative update. And then we've made some space for member updates this meeting. So if you have things that you'd like to share, some wins or challenges that are relevant in the manufacturing workforce development space, that would be a place that we could, that you would have to do that. And then we have wrap up and next steps. At the end of this, at the end of the meeting today, there will be a survey regarding the effectiveness and usefulness of the agenda items as we go through them. So that is our agenda that we have today. And with that, we'll move on to the consent agenda item. So hopefully folks have had time to review the minutes ahead of time. I'll go ahead and give you just a minute if you haven't. There are 2 sets of minutes because we did not have a quorum in the October consortium meeting. Be just a minute to review. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
So moved.
I have a second.
Yep, second.
Thank you. Any discussion on this? Okay, so if everyone can just indicate in the chat with a yes or no, if you approve the consent agenda as presented. Okay, I think we have reached consensus and we know everyone's chat is working. So with that, we'll go ahead and approve the minutes as written. Ronan has indicated that we do not have any public comment. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Julia Pontoni to do a workforce Pell update.
Thank you, Diane, and good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Julia Pontoni, and I'm the Director of the Office of Workforce Investments at the HEC. My office supports the State Workforce Board, which is called the Workforce and Talent Development Board here in Oregon, and we work really closely with Oregon's 9 local workforce development boards. And we run a number of different grant programs that fund both the local workforce boards and other workforce training providers, focused mostly on short-term workforce-based training. As Diane mentioned, with Jennifer Purcell's departure from the HEC, the Future Ready Oregon team has been moved into my office, which I'm thrilled about. I think it's a really natural fit. And my team has already been working really closely with the Future Ready Oregon team over the past couple of years. So this will only further our collaboration and the integration of HEC's broad workforce body of work. But I'm here today to talk about Workforce Pell. My office has been tasked with leading the HEC's implementation of Workforce Pell here in Oregon. Next slide, please. Before I talk about Workforce Pell, though, I just want to level set with what regular Pell grants are. Some of you probably know, but regular Pell grants are federal grants that help students offset the cost of higher education. Like the Oregon Opportunity Grant, which you also might have heard of, Pell grants don't need to be repaid. They're just money for students to use to get education. To be eligible for a Pell Grant, students have to have exceptional financial need. They need to have not already earned a bachelor's, graduate, or professional degree, with some small exceptions. They have to have earned a high school diploma, a GED, or the equivalent, and they have to be a citizen or an eligible non-citizen. And Pell Grants, the regular Pell Grants, can only be used at accredited higher education institutions for undergraduate degree programs, again, with a few exceptions there, or credit-bearing certificate programs that are longer than 600 clock hours and are delivered over at least 15 weeks. Workforce Pell was passed as part of HR 1, the big budget bill that Congress passed back in 2025. And it expanded the Pell Grant program to provide workforce Pell Grants to the same Pell eligible learners, but allowing those folks to enroll in short-term workforce training programs. This slide outlines the program eligibility for Workforce Pell. So as you'll recall, regular Pell Grants, largely undergraduate degrees and credential programs that were longer than 600 hours. Those are some those are just the basic eligibility for regular Pell Grants, but workforce Pell Grants, to be eligible, programs need to meet a lot more criteria. First, the program must be aligned with the job requirements of high skill, high wage, high demand industry sectors or occupations. Programs need to meet the hiring requirements of employers in those sectors or occupations for which they're intended. They need to be stackable, which means that students need to be able to receive academic, or they need to be able to use the credential as academic credit that counts towards an additional degree program or credential program. There is an exception to the stackability requirement if the program prepares students for employment in an occupation for which there is really only one recognized post-secondary credential, for example, potentially truck driving, then a CDL training program, which might not stack to an additional credential, would be okay to use for workforce Pell Grants. And then the program must be portable, which just means that it can't be only recognized by one employer. It needs to meet the hiring requirements of multiple employers. In addition, the program needs to be at least 150 clock hours, but less than 600 clock hours, and delivered over at least 8 weeks, but fewer than 15 weeks. It needs to have been offered for at least a year before learners can start using the workforce Pell Grants in it. It has to have a completion rate of at least 70% and a job placement rate of at least 70%. And the cost of the program cannot exceed the value added earnings of completers. That value added earnings is the earnings above the poverty line that completers earn after completing the program. In HR 1, it is the governor's responsibility in consultation with the state workforce board to further define these eligibility criteria in the red box. So what is high skill? What is high wage? What is in demand, for example? The remaining criteria that you see in the green box and also not in a box, in HR 1, that is the responsibility of the U.S. Department of Education to determine. However, the Department of Education is currently in a rulemaking process, and the draft rules would remand these criteria in the green box down to the state. So HEC would have responsibility for ensuring that programs meet these criteria in the green box as well. But those rules aren't final yet, so we don't know for sure that Oregon will be responsible for checking those eligibility requirements. Next slide, please. So in Oregon, we do have current definitions for high skill, high wage, and high demand occupations. High skill occupations are those where the typical educational level required for entry is some sort of post-secondary training, non-degree or higher. So just some sort of post-secondary training. And then high wage is occupations paying more than the all occupation median wage, which most recently was about $55,000 per year. And then high demand is having more than the median number of total openings, most recently more than 645 total openings. However, the Workforce and Talent Development Board is interested in revisiting these definitions. They have raised questions like, is a $55,000 a year job really a high wage job? So as part of their biennial talent assessment process, which is going on right now, they will be exploring these definitions and whether or not we need to adjust them. In demand industry sector occupation, we don't currently have a standard definition for in-demand industry sector or occupation. What you see here is from the rules that the Department of Education has been working on. So these are draft, and they provide a little bit more definition around these terms, but still will require states to further define what in-demand industry sector occupation means. Again, this will the WTDB, the Workforce and Talent Development, is working on these definitions as part of the talent assessment process. Next slide. A quick timeline. So in Q4 of 2025, HEC staff did an initial review of programs at community colleges to see how many programs roughly could be eligible for Workforce Pell. This was certainly not exact, particularly because we don't know the definitions yet of some of the eligibility criteria, but just sort of a quick scan. The short answer is not very many programs at all would meet the current eligibility requirements. And a lot of the reason for that is at least initially because of program length. There aren't that many programs that exist that meet the length requirements of the Workforce Pell eligibility. So that's certainly something that community colleges are concerned about, and potentially other training providers, and working actively to see if there are ways that they can shift their existing programs to meet the program length requirements or create new programs that are more in line with the eligibility requirements.
Are the programs too short or too long currently?
Both.
Oh, okay.
One of the big challenges is the program requirements in the Workforce Pell statute really are meant for a semester-based system, which we don't have in Oregon. So, that makes it more difficult for us. But yeah, they're both either too long or too short. And then I provided a similar briefing orientation to the HEC Commission and the Workforce and Talent Development Board in December, and we kicked off the talent assessment process, which again will define some of the eligibility criteria. We're hoping that the WTDB will approve those definitions at its March meeting. We'll see, that might not happen, but that's what we're going for. And then we hope that the governor will approve those recommended definitions sometime in the Q2 of 2026. We are also actively at the HEC working to develop a program approval process for programs to apply to be eligible for Workforce Pell. And so once the governor approves definitions, we can integrate that into our approval process and start approving programs. The actual Workforce Pell grants become available July 1st of 2026. We might not be ready to start using those dollars in Oregon. We might not have the approval process up and running. We still don't have final rules from the feds. So we're not exactly sure when students in Oregon will be able to start using Workforce Pell grants, but that's through the federal statute, that is when they become available. Next slide. Okay, I think my last slide got cut off, but that's okay. I just wanted to share some opportunities for the industry consortia engagement in this process. First, there will be opportunities for you to participate in talent assessment interviews, focus groups, surveys to inform those key definitions. I think one of the big ways that the industry consortia can plug into this are aligning the priority credentials that you'll be working on this year to identify to Workforce Pell eligibility requirements. And then finally, you can assist in validating credentials. So as you saw in the eligibility criteria, programs need to be aligned with the hiring requirements of industry. And so the industry consortia will be a great place for us to bring those questions to verify that the credentials we're improving really are in line with industry needs. And I'm happy to take any questions. Can you remind me, Carly asked, can you remind me, are Pell Grants paid directly to the students or to the educational institution? They're to the educational institution.
Thank you.
Travis asks, have Pell Grants traditionally been 18 plus, FAFSA submitted, etc.? Would this open up grants to students transitioning from high school? Open up grants to students. Can you, Travis, sorry, can you say, would this open up grants to students transitioning from high school? What you mean by that?
Yeah, sorry. We wonder if some of the apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship things we're doing are credentials that are like quick start that Intel has done, or credentials that might fall into that window of greater than X number of weeks, but smaller than 15 weeks. If that would allow for students who are 17, 18, 19, who are going into high wage, high demand credentialing, would they be able to draw Pell Grants? Or is this still sort of like within the framework we have always applied of like, this is a kid applying to community college or university, and therefore it needs to meet all those old standards?
For registered apprenticeships, certainly you can use workforce Pell Grants for registered apprenticeships. Pre-apprenticeships, unless they're at a community college, probably not, because they need to be delivered by an accredited institution of higher education.
Thank you, Julia.
Yep.
So so just follow up the FAFSA part of that question.
Yes.
So what if it's not the FAFSA that they're required to do? What's the income eligibility?
I'm pretty sure it will be the FAFSA that they're.
Oh goodness, okay. And then could I ask on the program cost must be less than or equal to value-added earnings. Is there a set time frame for that? I mean, is it 1 year, 10 years? Like what's the I'm in the weeds, but it's curious.
I'll have to look that up for you.
Okay. Well,
And
you.
I will do that and get back to you.
And then I'm guessing that that question with the value added learning, the cost, that same requirement doesn't necessarily apply to normal Pell recipients, right? Like that.
Correct.
Okay.
But that is another, a lot of high demand occupations like childcare, CNAs, for example, likely wouldn't meet that eligibility requirement. Any other questions?
Hey, one more question, Julia.
Sure.
If a registered apprenticeship can be eligible for Pell Granting, can a registered youth apprenticeship be eligible?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hey, Julia, thank you so much. And if folks have questions that they think of as we're going on in the meeting, just go ahead and put them in the chat and we can follow up on those. Okay, next up we have Jennifer Rice, and she is a workforce industry specialist of workforce investments. She'll be talking to us today about industry sector engagement.
Awesome. Thanks, Diane. Hey, everyone. My name is Jennifer Rice. I'm a workforce industry specialist at the HEC, like Diane just said. I'm going to be sharing some information with y'all today about what the local workforce boards have going on with manufacturing specifically. Next slide, please. So I am, as I mentioned, an industry specialist. So I focus on 5 key industries in Oregon, and I help by doing sector research, helping to support the local workforce boards and industry engagement. I also do grant management for the industry engagement grant. And so most of the information that I'll be sharing today is related to the industry engagement grant that each local workforce board receives and reports on quarterly. So this quarter will be for, and I'll say this all the time. So this quarter we're going to be looking at is from October through December 2025. So you'll see that I focus on certain industries, so construction, early childhood education, / K-12 education, leisure and hospitality, and transportation and logistics. You'll notice that all of the industries that both Brian and myself cover are not the same industries that the industry consortia folks cover. So we're trying to analyze kind of the other industries that aren't captured through the consortia. So Brian, I believe he's also here today. He focuses on agriculture, maritime, and renewables and kind of clean energy in there. So we both do similar things as far as industry engagement, grant management, and sector research. We work with the industry, or we work with the consortia strategists because there is just so much overlap in sectors that sometimes we have to kind of get together and have a conversation about what that overlap might actually look like, and figuring out how we can support each other through that. So next slide, please. I'm going to kind of tell you what the function of a sector partnership is. So each local workforce board has sector partnerships in various industries. So those sector partnerships are supposed to be industry driven, an alliance of those regional employers, training providers, community-based organizations, and state agencies. You might be saying, wow, that sounds a lot like the consortia that I'm on. And you know what? It is kind of similar, but more locally responsive. So while you all take a more statewide lens, the local workforce boards are focusing on other industries and more regionally responsive, which is, it's nice to elevate some of the things that they're mentioning to a state audience. So thank you for that opportunity today. So the local workforce boards work collaboratively to address some of the shared talent and skill needs that employers need. And so all of these meetings that require industry engagement and that require the function of the sector partnership is coordinated and convened by the local workforce development boards. And depending on, their availability, they have different people who focus on different sectors, but some local workforce boards have one person that covers every sector. So it's a little bit different around the state. So I just wanted to let you know that as well. Next slide, please. So this slide has all of the local workforce boards on it, and I tried to capture in little squares all of the different boards that have manufacturing as a formal sector partnership. Exciting news. You'll notice the one that doesn't have manufacturing, East Cascades Works, is working on launching their sector partnership in manufacturing this next quarter, hopefully. So you may hear some more about their launch of their sector partnership as well. And also, they won't be included in reporting that I discuss here in this meeting today because they haven't had a sector partnership historically. And recently, the Eastern Oregon Workforce Board is no longer doing manufacturing. So while there is a nice box on there now, that is not currently the case. So they will also be excluded from the conversation today, which is, half the state. So being a little missing from the conversation. So it's exciting that East Cascades Works is adding manufacturing. Next slide, please. Thank you. So some of the highlights that the local workforce boards reported was a lot of earn and learn opportunities, which is really great. So people would have the opportunity to earn money while they're learning about a job. One of the examples of that is that Lane Workforce Partnership helped to support its third cohort of biomanufacturing apprenticeships. And we know that this is in partnership with Oregon Life Sciences, and that they had done a pilot, but now this pilot has been successful, it sounds like, and they're going to be continuing that. Rogue Workforce Partnership You'll see that there are abbreviations, and I swear I will say them out loud. Rogue Workforce Partnership focus on the upskilling of incumbent workers, which is focused on advanced manufacturing, operational efficiency, and leadership. So it's interesting because you might be like, oh, you know, what jobs are they thinking of for these outcomes of these trainings? But these trainings are responsive to what industry has asked for in that area. So that's why they've chosen these specific trainings. SOWIB, so the Southwestern Oregon Workforce Investment Board, created an informal pre-apprenticeship program in 2024 in manufacturing, and they're seeking BOLI approval for it to actually be a formal pre-apprenticeship, which is great news. The Work Systems Advanced Semiconductor Workforce Pipeline has expanded, so it's no longer only Intel. 22 additional employers have signed on and are hiring graduates. So that's really exciting that they were able to kind of diversify their employers and really do some targeted outreach to manufacturing, the manufacturing industry. And the Portland area. Work Systems covers Portland. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. Some other cool things that the local workforce boards have going on is that Willamette Workforce Partnership is planning to host biannual manufacturing summits. And those will be coming in early 2027. So while they're planning for them for next year, the fact that we're having the conversation now and I'm sharing all of this information with you all now will hopefully create some kind of synergy between y'all and the boards. And if these events occur in your areas, maybe there's opportunity to partner. So also, Work Systems launched a new advanced manufacturing sector report. This is a live link, and so I know that y'all have received these slides ahead of time. So if you do have the opportunity to read that advanced manufacturing sector report, it's really fascinating. There's a lot of really great information there. And lastly, the Cascadia Manufacturing Network is a group of local workforce boards. So the local workforce board in Southwest Washington, Work Systems, and Clackamas Workforce Partnership have combined and have their sector partnership is called the Cascadia Manufacturing Network. So with that, Careers Northwest, which is their website, has officially launched a focus on manufacturing career exploration and training tools. So the goal of that website is to help people kind of understand what it's like to work in manufacturing and what it takes to get there. And so the idea is really to connect all of the same people that are really in this room, except for students. So to connect educators, students, and industry partners across Portland Metro. So Clackamas, Portland, Southwest Washington.
I can also share that actually Microchip has just recently this week agreed to host their April meeting at our wafer fab here in Gresham. So if anyone is super interested in attending that, let me know. I can pull some strings. I know a few people here to get you in.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. And one thing that I just kind of received information on after I made this slide was that Rogue Workforce Partnership has helped create some clearer advancement pathways for specific employers. So there was a new employer in White City. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Southern Oregon, but that employer needed more support and training and upskilling their current and new staff members. But so Rogue Workforce Partnership helped by providing 2 on-the-job trainings, 2 youth at work experiences, and 2 incumbent worker trainings to assist in this new expansion of this manufacturing facility. So that's just another way that the local workforce boards can kind of help along the way. All right, so next slide, please. All right, so we've made this lovely chart that kind of shows what some of the themes were in reporting. You'll notice that the Eastern Workforce Board and East Cascades Works are not on this because they don't have those sector partnerships. But these were the other themes that emerged from those who submitted reporting for this sector. You'll notice that the one across the board is industry and education alignment. So that theme came up in every single report. So I just wanted to say that and underscore, I guess, the importance of the work that y'all are doing in this consortia and how it is in alignment with industry need and what other workforce professionals are saying as well. I don't know. I'll leave this here just for a couple more seconds so that you can see a little bit about what some of the other concerns were, you know, about the industry itself, about youth pipelines, just so you have this information to analyze because it is a conglomeration of all of the reporting I have received from the local workforce boards. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. Some common opportunities that were mentioned throughout the reporting was related to these 5 buckets. So workforce development is an opportunity to create clearer career pathways, which feels like what y'all are doing all the time. So there's also training and education as a theme to develop more pre-apprenticeships, align curriculum with what the industry needs. These are all opportunities, you know, to really jump on. The industry image is something that people have talked about throughout the reporting as well, and how to promote kind of like a modern manufacturing image, a rebrand kind of. There's also the economic and market conditions that can be a little bit scary for people. I think that you have the opportunity, if you wanted to partner with the local workforce boards on job fairs or dislocated worker support. Dislocated worker, somebody who has been laid off, just so we're all on the same page. Technology and innovation, so maybe upskilling, helping to figure out what training somebody might need for upskilling. So those are the main opportunities that were identified through the reporting. All right, next slide, please. So for all of you all, this is the first time that I have shared any information with you all, and to kind of create that crosswalk between the local workforce development boards and this group. So I have developed a kind of some questions, just 2 questions to ask you all. Like, would it be valuable to have a specific local workforce development board share about their programs or more information about their initiatives? Or what questions do you have about this manufacturing sector partnerships that exist, so that if I do return in the future, I can make sure that the information that I provide to you all is valuable.
I mean, I would say, yeah, that would absolutely be valuable. I can say personally, you know, Microchip participates with work systems and some of the programs they do, but I don't necessarily know what other programs that they're doing, and that would just be really good information to have. You know, so much of what that we've learned as an organization and as an industry is copying what other what other sectors are doing and other businesses are doing, and so I think there would be a lot of value in sharing all the different initiatives that they have going on.
Okay, I can definitely gather more on initiatives. There was some more information on like different events that the local workforce boards have put on. We decided to take that information out. So in the future, I could keep that information, or I could share it with Diane to see if anyone has capacity to partner or attend. I'm not sure what that process might look like. But I'm definitely open to developing that with you all.
One thing that would also be helpful is if you're seeing trends where there are clear barriers that are existing in areas that might have might occur in other places as well, as well as strategies that are being taken at the local level that are proving to be effective in getting potential employees trained and skilled up for the industry in their area, and how they approach that, especially when it comes to how do they integrate with education on those things.
Okay.
And I'm going to piggyback off Craig's comment. What might be more helpful from my perspective is someone like Georgia Conrad to come in from the OWP to give kind of a statewide systems glimpse into how the local workforce boards are kind of strategizing from a statewide kind of systems lens, and then to see those actual examples kind of show up might be a great kind of secondary presentation.
Okay, cool. So you're saying to have Georgia come in and talk about their manufacturing strategy, and then I could come in and share more pointed details?
Yeah, you could see a local example.
Okay, cool.
But that, like, to have that kind of broader picture first, like before we jump in to see a local example, that would at least be really helpful for me.
Okay, thanks. Well, the next slide is my thank you slide. So thank you so much for letting me come here and share some information with you all. Hopefully, we'll be able to provide some more information that you all would like to receive in the future. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity to share a little bit more about the reporting that I received from the local workforce boards and how y'all might integrate into that. So thanks again.
Jen, thank you very much. I think this was great. So we are just a few minutes ahead, but next up we have Dr. Amy Cox with the Future Ready Oregon Year 4 report.
Thank you, Diane, and good morning, everyone. I'm so happy my camera's working. When I did this at the Healthcare Industry Consortium meeting, my computer was not my friend. So it's a pleasure to be with you this morning and to present this 4th annual Future Ready Oregon report that our office puts together. This is the 3rd time I think I have presented this to the Manufacturing Industry Consortium, and it's great to be here. I want to just stay on this title slide for 1 second, and that is to reference a couple things. This report is put together by statute every year as an evaluative report on the progress and impacts of Future Ready Oregon. And it is put together by many people in the Office of Research and Data. So I am here really representing a whole team of people who have done this work, and I want to acknowledge them. I also want to acknowledge from this slide that our office works separately from the Future Ready Oregon team. So sometimes we get questions about whether this report is objective or neutral. That is definitely the intent and goal of our office. And while we work closely with the Future Ready Oregon team to confirm that we're not misrepresenting things, I do want to assure you that the generally good outcomes and findings that I will share with you today are not an advertisement, but rather really the findings that we continue to see from this investment. So next slide, please. I know all of you know what Future Ready Oregon is. This slide summarizes that, and across its 8 programs, the Industry Consortia being one of them. I wanted to include this slide anyway, because it highlights the lens through which we evaluate the progress and the impacts of the program. And that lens is really these double goals of the investment. One being an economic goal to address labor shortages, to help, especially in the key industries, and the other an equity goal to advance those economic prosperity outcomes for groups who have historically and to some degree currently been marginalized in post-secondary education and training. So that is those. I will return to those questions near the end of this presentation, but I do want to call your attention to those two goals of the investment overall. Next slide. Give you a little bit of a heads up about where we're going today. The fourth annual evaluation does show continued good outcomes. Generally speaking, there are some exceptions, but continued good outcomes in this at this point of the investment. It is a time limited investment for the most part, the industry consortia being an exception to that, as they will continue, as you know. The outcomes that we show here are through June 30th, 2025 for participants. So a lot of the outcomes are through June 30th, 2025. Some of the non-participant outcomes extend a bit later into 2025. But the investment itself runs through June 30th of 2026. So we're well into the time period of Future Ready Oregon in this report. And what we have found is that, yes, we do continue to see positive economic outcomes for participants, and we see some evidence of that for industry as well. However, the underreporting of Social Security numbers, which is the way that we track those employment and economic outcomes, does hamper some of that good news story. The second question, has Future Ready Oregon led to greater equity? Yes, we see representation among all of the priority populations that are laid out in statute. We do see some need to reach older adult Oregonians more. I'll get into that in greater detail. And in general, has the investment been effective? Yes, we do. This is the first year that we have asked this question, which is a key driver of how we assess impact, is whether or not that investment has been effective. And yes, we have continued to see a number of things that have been effective in the implementation of the investment. Next slide. This year's report examines, as I referenced, the participant outcomes, so the numbers of participants served, the kind of services, workforce training services they've received, their completion rate of those services, their employment outcomes, and with a number of different measures. It also looks at the economic landscape in which this investment has landed, especially whether or not there continues to be such a strong demand for labor in those key industries that are laid out in the statute, manufacturing, of course, but also healthcare and technology. And it lays out progress toward the goals of the individual 8 programs and the investment overall, and concludes with recommendations. All of these components of the report are laid out in statute. So the report itself is quite long. That is because we not only need to answer all of these pieces, but we need to do so, again, for each individual one of the 8 programs, as well as for the investment overall. Next slide, please. The economic landscape that I referenced, Oregon's economy continues to need workers in these key industries. This, I'm sure, is not a surprise to the folks in this room. It is an important part of the information that the legislature receives when they receive this report, to hear that, yes, this the need for this investment is ongoing. We have laid out here some of the ways that we measure that: the number of open positions, the number of difficult to fill positions, the projected increase in those positions, the percentage that require post-secondary training, the wages, in other words, another reason why these industries are key industries, not only because of the labor demand, but because they offer good wages compared to many jobs in the economy, and the occupations that are projected to grow most in those industries. You see that we by all of these measures, really, manufacturing is an important part of this story. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes the findings for Future Ready Oregon overall across all of the programs. And what I can tell you is that, again, through June 30th of last year, 27,000 participants have been served by Future Ready Oregon to date. 90% of them come from more than one priority population. So virtually every participant in Future Ready Oregon is low income, is coming from a low income background. Above and beyond being low income, which is one of the priority populations, 90% of the participants also reported being from at least one other priority population. So this is a more diverse group than the labor force. This is a key starting point to being able to have post-secondary education and training, in this case, especially workforce-related training, reaching communities that have not been as connected to the workforce system or to the labor force in general. Those participants participated in more than 80,000 different kinds of services. Those services have very high completion rates. I will tell you these services range from training or like a resume writing training or an expungement clinic that lasts for maybe a day or several hours, to trainings that last over the course of many weeks. So they range widely and across, and certainly the fact that some are very short term contributes to the high completion rate. Nevertheless, this high level of completion rate, 96% overall, is quite striking. And we see that those high completion rates across different priority populations and across the different component programs of Future Ready Oregon. The completion rates range a bit across priority populations and across the programs, but they're all quite high. And that is a very good news and good finding of this investment. It's something that we've continued to track over the years and continue to see, because of course, participating in a training is only the initial part, but completing the training is really where participants would get the value from it. For participants who started out as not employed when they first participated, 74% of them were employed after those services. We will continue to track those participants. We expect that percentage will continue to rise a bit. It is higher this year than it was last year as more time goes by. Most participants found employment within 1 or 2 quarters after they completed services, but some will take a bit longer, and we will expect that to rise a bit. Nonetheless, that's a strong employment rate for those who were not employed at the beginning. Compared to other workforce training, I would say. We also looked at wage outcomes. So for participants who were employed when they began services, we can track whether their wages increased after they participated. And we saw that they did. And we saw this, again, across the different component programs and across priority populations. That wage increase ranged depending on the program, but it, on average, across the different programs for all participants in Future Ready Oregon, was a median quarterly wage increase of more than $1,600, which is not small. That's about $500 more a month that people are making. In the focus industries of healthcare and manufacturing, we also tracked how many of those jobs and how many participants moved into those jobs net of any participants who left those industries. So in other words, we looked at, after services, how many participants were working in healthcare and manufacturing. And then we also noticed that some participants had been employed in a key industry before services and moved into a different industry after services. And so we took those out. So a net gain is what we're showing here on this slide. And what I want to call out here is that the net gain for manufacturing was 341 workers over this time period. I want to acknowledge that is not an enormous number. So the scale here is the piece that is challenging some of these findings. It's still a net gain. We'll continue to track this over time. Obviously, manufacturing needs more than 340 new workers. So that is that's the piece that we'll continue to look at. How many more workers is manufacturing gaining through participation in Future Ready Oregon? And then this last call out box I want to note, this is something that we talked about last year as well. Participants have to report their social security number in order for us to be able to tell you any of these economic outcomes. We virtually cannot track anybody's employment without social security number. This is a very sensitive bit of information. There's a lot of information that grantees ask participants to provide that is sensitive, and the grantees ranged in how well they were able to get that information from participants, because no participant is required to report any of this information that's personal about themselves. And we work with the grantees to give them trauma-informed materials for data collection, to help explain and understand, help participants understand why they're asking for this, how we keep their data secure. Nonetheless, it's not required, and we are missing a social security number for 42% of participants. I will say that it's gotten better over the last year, and we'll continue to work with grantees to hope it continues to get better, so that we can better track employment outcomes. Next slide, please. This is just a couple highlights for each of the 8 component programs. I'm not going to go through every piece of this slide, but I do want to call out a couple things. One is for Prosperity 10,000, which is the first program listed here. It is the only one of the 8 programs that has specific numeric goals associated with it. That investment, that portion of the broader investment, is designed to reach 10,000 participants. It is administered through the local workforce development boards. The boards are well on their way to it meeting that goal, with essentially 1 year left of funding. They had reached almost 10,000 participants at that point. They also, Prosperity 10,000, have some of the highest employment outcomes among participants. 80% of them were employed. They saw an almost $1,900 quarterly wage increase, and had the highest service completion rate. Career Pathways is a program at the community colleges. It used the Future Ready Oregon investment both to support students who go into these career connecting training programs. And it also used the investment to build out infrastructure to be able to attract more participants in coming years. We saw strong outcomes for those participants as well, and we'll continue to track them going forward. Workforce Ready Grants is the largest portion of Future Ready Oregon funding. It is the one program that really is still well underway and will be through next year in terms of serving participants. You'll see an asterisk there next to that, and next to registered apprenticeships, and next to youth programs. Those are the programs that have relatively low reporting of Social Security numbers, so the employment outcomes here are a bit less generalizable. I do want to call out for the Workforce Ready Grants, though, the 55% of participants who were employed. That is undoubtedly low, partly because, or lower than some of the other programs, partly because of the timing of Workforce Ready Grants. So it is continuing to serve participants. Many of those participants in this group have just finished services. So we really do expect that number to rise more than many of them in the coming year. And then yes, there are other outcomes for all of these different programs. I don't want to go over time. So I'm going to say next slide, please. So if we put all of that together, again, at a very high level, what we have found is that, yes, Future Ready Oregon has continued to lead to greater economic prosperity. This is true for participants themselves who are experiencing high job placement and rising wages after services. It is also the case for the focus industries who are gaining new workers. However, the underreporting of Social Security number does limit this understanding to some degree. And then, has Future Ready Oregon led to greater equity? Yes, we are seeing that as well. All of the priority populations have been well served. Completion rates and employment outcomes are consistent across groups. We will note that Oregonians ages 40 and up are among participants, but they are underrepresented among participants. That is very important, not only because they're a priority population at risk of age discrimination, but also because they are the largest group in the population. There are simply not enough workers at younger ages to be able to replace retiring workers. And so reaching and engaging and including Oregonians age 40 and up is essential, is necessary to help fill labor shortages. And so that is a group we really want to call attention to. And then lastly, has Future Ready Oregon been effective? Yes, we have seen it in a number of ways. In addition to the results I've just described for the first two questions, we have seen new partnerships formed. We have seen the availability of wraparound support services. And those new partnerships have made training both more focused and more effective. Partnerships with local businesses, partnerships with community-based organizations. Those partnerships we have heard repeatedly have helped training become more tailored and have contributed to the high completion rates. The same thing is true for wraparound support services. We also looked to see if Future Ready Oregon participants were different ways we might be able to measure whether they were new to the labor force or new to workforce training. And we found a substantial number of participants who had never been in WIOA workforce training, WIOA being the Federal Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act and the other large publicly funded workforce training program. All of those good news findings are true, but there are some limitations. I've talked about Social Security numbers, also this issue of scale, especially for industries. The impacts on the manufacturing sector have not been as high as the need is to fill. So that is a piece that we'll continue to look at to see if that expands in the coming year with the Workforce Ready grants that have been focused on manufacturing. Next slide, please. And then we conclude with 4 recommendations based on general findings across all of this work. The first finding is that a lot of these positive results that we have seen, the high completion rates, the high employment rates, the rising wages, really appear very closely related to, as I said, the availability of wraparound supports and the development of these new partnerships. And so the recommendation following that for Future Ready Oregon, that investments that are continuing and for future workforce training investments is for workforce training to use these community-centered and person-centered approaches. Overall finding number 2, as I mentioned, adults age 40 and older are underrepresented among the participants, but are essential to fill labor shortages. And so the recommendation from there, very clear, to continue to reach, to intensify outreach efforts so that grantees can continue to reach Oregonians age 40 and up. Next slide, please. Number 3, not the most exciting recommendation for a lot of people, but so important to be able to really assess the impact of this investment, is to increase the reporting of Social Security numbers. As I mentioned, we recommended this last year as well, and we did see grantees increase that reporting of Social Security numbers with the participants they're serving, and we are hopeful that that would continue in the coming year as well. And then lastly, this is the first year we've been able to make this recommendation because we've had enough sort of data and findings to base it on. But what we see really is that this kind of workforce development investment has yielded strong outcomes. Those outcomes limited in scale, and so the need is still very much there, even though the funding will be over in June of this year. And so our recommendation is to extend this kind of equitable and innovative workforce development investment, drawing on the models that we have seen succeed so well in many of the programs, many of the grantees, in order to continue to increase the labor force, fill labor shortages, and provide routes to more economic prosperity for individual Oregonians. And with that, I'd be happy to take questions. I think we still have a few minutes. Eric.
Thank you. Probably more of a comment than a question, but interesting information. When I look at the, trying to target more of the 40-year-old plus workers, I guess I just keep coming back to something I know I've been kind of harping on at our quarterly meetings, is the need to try to focus on, incumbent workers in our more traditional industries. I know that we've got a lot of businesses that we work with here in the Willamette Valley are, agriculture, food, manufacturing, kind of general manufacturing, are all trying to be more productive and more efficient with their existing workers. And I don't know how effective we're being in really trying to target those employers, and I'm maybe making an assumption that some of their employment or workforce is the target of over 40, but I'm kind of visualizing that as being a real, my hopes for some of this Future Ready Oregon funding to go to those businesses that are trying to adopt new, machinery and equipment that require upskilling of workers, of existing workers, or working with manufacturing extension partnership on new processes and new ways of doing business that also require that kind of training. So I think I'd still like to, I'll keep harping about incumbent worker training, but that feels like something that could counter that 40-year-old plus lack of participation.
Eric, I would just add that you're spot on. I have mentioned simply because of time constraints, really, the reach of Future Ready Oregon to new workers in the labor force. It is designed to be both and, to both reach new workers and to reach existing workers for upskilling, for moving into jobs that provide that upward mobility. There are a number of grantees and training services that are focused specifically on incumbent workers. And that is the degree to which the participants are incumbent workers or new in the labor force is something we've only begun to touch on in the report this year. More directly, we will be doing that a bit more in the coming year. So in the final report that comes out at the end of 2026. So yes, you're spot on.
Thank you.
Amy, I just wanted to make a suggestion. One thing that your group might want to look at is the advertising and the vetting process used in some of the sectors, like you mentioned, that the manufacturing sector results aren't quite as strong as you'd like them to be. And just in my narrow experience with some of these programs, that sometimes I think has been the challenge, where I'm not sure how well it was advertised to the population or the community. And definitely sometimes there were better opportunities where the candidates weren't very well vetted, and had they been better vetted, they would have probably then most likely had a better outcome. And so that just might be something really interesting to look at when you're seeing some of the sectors that aren't doing as well. That might be an area to take a peek at and see if there could be improvements in those areas.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Travis.
Thanks for your presentation. I'm here with my colleague, Fernando Garcia Robledo, and we're talking about folks that we know in Oregon who are leaving the state for apprenticeships in Texas specifically. And we wondered, is there data from when we look back at the success of Future Ready Oregon, do we have data that shows the high wage, high demand occupations that we have, and then the lack of or the existence of the training programs we need to fill those occupations?
We do include in the report a list of the high demand, high wage occupations in the key industries. Yes, that is part of that economic landscape chapter. We don't identify the specific trainings needed for each one of those occupations, but what we do is track, as I showed, just the percentage of participants, who move into the industries. Unfortunately, employment data don't show us the occupations people move into, so we can't track them moving into those occupations. In terms of the trainings themselves that are needed, a large part of how grantees were chosen, all of the Future Ready Oregon funding that led to workforce training through grantees was applied for, and there were more applications than there was funding, and they were administered through more than one agency. So different agencies did the application selection differently. The Bureau of Labor and Industries runs the apprenticeship programs in the state, and they had 4 rounds of funding, and they were specifically tied to apprenticeship programs and pre-apprenticeship training in healthcare, manufacturing, and construction. And so they identified trainings needed in those areas and selected organizations applying to create new apprenticeships and new pre-apprenticeship programs in those areas. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it would be really helpful to see how many of those were created under those sector-specific areas that you mentioned, construction, health.
That is in the report. That is in the report and in the registered apprenticeship program section. I can't pull it up right now, but I'd be happy to follow up with you and let you know.
Thank you. We anecdotally were hearing from community members that the wait time to get into an apprenticeship is long in Oregon. And so folks are leaving the state to access programs in other states where they're more available. Thank you for your.
We have heard that too. And the apprenticeship program approval process is also long. It's a long process to have a new apprenticeship program approved. And so the original design in Future Ready Oregon was to have those new apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs up and running within the first year of funding. And it ended up taking really a first full 2 years before they were up and running. And but the design of the program was to expand that investment, expand the number of seats. Thanks, Ronan, for putting the link to the full report in the chat. To expand the number of available slots, so to reduce that time, that waiting time. And the process of creating those programs in and of itself took long. That does not mean that even with the expansion that it was sufficient. I don't at all want to imply that. I think that that is one of the conclusions really across this whole report, is that this training has been successful. That does not mean it has filled the need. And I think apprenticeships is a really good example of that. But I'll follow up with you on the number of new programs and the number of participants in those apprenticeship programs.
Thank you for that. The reason that we participate in this as a school district is that we're concerned about that time span too. We spent several years trying to create our first apprenticeship, and we understand that how long it takes in Oregon. And I think with the number of manufacturers leaving the state and the number of workers that we need to keep, if folks are going to come to Oregon, they need the skilled workforce in order to have employees here. So we're participating with that lens. Thank you for the information.
Yes, thank you so much. Are there other questions? Okay, then Diane, I think I have filled my time and the couple extra minutes you gave me. And I will turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Amy. A lot of good information and some opportunities for us based on what you presented. So thank you. Now we are going to move on to something that came up in several of the one-on-ones I had with consortium members. And that is we're getting an update from Business Oregon on the Governor's Prosperity Initiative. So Arthur, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Diane, and good morning, everybody. We're going to talk today about the Governor's Prosperity Initiative, and we're going to focus a little bit on a draft statewide economic development strategy that Business Oregon has begun. A lot of this is preliminary, so we're going to learn more as the legislative session goes on. I hopefully will be able to come back with more concrete information and a lot more detail at a future meeting. So please keep in mind that this is a new initiative. It's just getting rolling. And some of you on the call may in fact know more about it than I do, looking at Kyle in particular. So feel free to chime in, anybody, if you know something that I don't. I want to start though, and I heard that Diane at the beginning say that we're going to try to get to our break a little early, and I'm aware that I'm between you and that. So we're going to try to keep this short, but let's begin with a quick description of Business Oregon. I hope everybody's heard of us before. We are the state's economic development department. I went ahead and wrote our mission down this morning because it's, I think, worth hearing. Our mission is to invest in Oregon businesses, communities, and people to promote a globally competitive, diverse, and inclusive economy. We have a vision of prosperity for all Oregonians. That is a sweeping mission, right? You can fit almost anything into that. And I think historically, that's what the legislature has done. If they've got something they want to do and it doesn't fit squarely into any other state agency, it kind of winds up at Business Oregon. So the breadth of our programs might be surprising to some of you. You're probably aware that we have the infrastructure finance side of the shop that is a little more than half our budget. And we have the business development side of the shop that's the rest of it. But I wonder if anybody on the call has a favorite oddball Business Oregon program you want to drop in the chat. I'll give you a minute to think about it. We have our broadband office that's going to spend about $750 million over the next 5 or 6 years laying fiber optic cable around the state. We've got a seismic rehab program for elementary schools and first responder buildings. Any favorites? Got a child care infrastructure fund that's expanding daycare slots around the country. Yep, Rebecca, University Innovation Research Fund, which hopefully is going to get some more money here soon. Fingers crossed. We own a dredge. We own I think it's a 50-foot long suction dredge. It's currently at the Port of Coos Bay, and it goes around Oregon's 23 ports, dredging channels and making sure that those ports are open for commerce. The Oregon Arts Commission and the Cultural Trust are housed here at Business Oregon. So the Arts Commission is grants for starving artists and for arts education programs. The Cultural Trust is grants for cultural institutions. We also curate and own and manage some of the artwork that gets displayed at the governor's office and a few other state buildings. So the impression I want to leave you with is that we are the island of misfit toys sometimes for the legislature. And there are a lot of things that are in our wheelhouse. But as we go through this draft economic development strategy, you're also going to see that strategy talk about a lot of things that are not in our wheelhouse. And I think workforce development is one of those, right? That's something that impacts economic development for the state, but it's not an activity that Business Oregon should lead, right? There are other partners, the state government, better equipped to to manage that. So we've looked at the objective slide. We're going to talk about the Prosperity Initiative, define business organs' role and what it isn't, and then we'll try to answer a couple of questions. I'm ready for the next slide, please. So you all probably saw the news when the governor released her prosperity roadmap. If you haven't seen that yet, here's a link in the chat. It's worth a read when we get done with this. What she does in this roadmap is lay out the problem and then a couple of big picture goals that she's adopted to try to address that. So the problem is that Oregon's economy is sputtering, right? We got hiring down, unemployment is up, population growth is flat, and we have a problem that we need to address. She's got 3 concrete goals listed here in this roadmap: increasing GDP growth, moving up in the CNBC workforce rankings, and moving up in the CNBC top states for business overall rankings. This roadmap has a couple of concrete strategies in it, and one of those directs Business Oregon to complete a state economic development strategy to address key topic areas such as capital access and entrepreneurship, business retention and expansion, business recruitment, workforce development, infrastructure, and incentive modernization. Next slide, please. So this roadmap didn't come out of nowhere. There's been a steady drumbeat of studies that support, studies and anecdotal information that support the need for something like this. This business recruitment study is one that Business Oregon did with the University of Oregon about a year ago, and a few folks on the call, I think, participated in the steering committee for this. But the goal of this study was to examine whether businesses are leaving the state, and if so, why. And the answer was, yes, they are leaving the state. The pace of that is perhaps picking up. If they're not leaving the state, maybe they're choosing to do their expansions outside of the state rather than here. Next slide, please. The study identified push factors and pull factors that were causing some of this. So the push factors were things pushing folks out of the state, like, regulatory climate, tax policies, high costs of doing business here, high cost of land and wages for employees. The pull factors were things that other states were offering. For example, lower taxes, regulatory certainty, strong economic development incentive tools. Business Oregon, when this study was finished, began working on modernizing some of our business incentive programs. That work is well underway. The Enterprise Zone is a good example. That's probably the state's flagship incentive program for manufacturers, but it's getting a little long in the tooth. It's a 40-year-old program and needs a refresh. Several of the others do as well. So we had started that incentive work when the governor's prosperity framework dropped, and I think absorbed some of that and built upon it. Next slide, please. So let's talk about this framework a little bit, and I'm going to put a link to that in the chat too. I encourage you to pull it up and flip through it as we talk. It should be more interesting than my face or even my PowerPoint probably. So I work with the McMinnville Economic Development Partnership pretty regularly, and they hired a new executive director a couple years ago, a woman named Patty Herzog, who came out of Nevada's Economic Development Department. And when she got here, one of the first things she asked me was, "So Arthur, where's the state's economic development strategy? I can't find it on your website anywhere." And I had to tell her, "Patty, we don't have one." And she said, "Well, you should fix that." And so here we are, a couple years later. Somebody listened to Patty maybe, and here we are now trying to write a statewide economic development strategy. What you're looking at on the website is a draft of that. This lays out sort of the problem statements and a couple of stretch goals maybe. What we're working on over the next month or so is trying to fill that in. Exactly how are we going to achieve those goals? What are our strategies going to be? Next slide, please. So yeah, you can see, that slide didn't, yeah, all right. Advance to the business retention and expansion slide, please. One more. There we go. So this is an example of one of the goals. So we want to help businesses grow and stay in Oregon. We've got several strategic goals in here. For example, expand flexibility and incentive programs for growing businesses. That speaks to the enterprise zone refresh that I talked about a moment ago. Develop targeted investments for key traded sector industries, perhaps building upon the CHIPS investment that we had a few years ago for the semiconductor industry. This goal is intended to recognize that business retention and expansion efforts are a top priority for the agency, and we're going to continue trying to elevate that. Conducting regular business visits is the very first thing in my job description, for example, as a regional development officer. There are 12 of us around the state. Our job is to go visit with companies, see how they're doing, see what their challenges are, make sure they're aware of the available programs might be able to help. And for a long time, we haven't had very many tools to use when we conduct those visits. So the goal is, this goal is focused on doing more of that work and having better tools with which to do it. Next slide, please. The business climate goal is one I think that still needs a lot of fleshing out on exactly how we're going to achieve some of these goals. But the idea is to rebuild confidence, right? So fix the perception that Oregon is not open for business. And by doing that, I think we have to change the reality that we haven't been entirely open for business sometimes. We want to pick up the pace on permitting, and we'll talk about a bill the governor's pushing in a moment that should help on that. Next slide, please. Regulation is not an activity that Business Oregon is going to lead. We're not a regulatory agency, right? We're an economic development agency. So our partners at ODOT and DEQ and DLCD and at the legislature are going to have to help here. But one effort that the governor has identified that will be part of this is a fast-track permitting program for major job-creating projects. The goal is not to weaken or water down regulations, but to make sure that the state agencies understand the importance of some of these projects and prioritize the really significant ones. So she's set dollar figures, I think $50 million in a rural area and 150 in metro. Projects of that size will trigger some prioritization on the part of relevant regulatory agencies. And that's, again, in that bill 4084 that the governor is proposing. Next slide, please. So innovation and entrepreneurship and capital access, this is something that the state has tried to focus on in recent years through our Innovation Hub programs. SEDCOR, for example, hosts an Innovation Hub here in the Mid-Valley. We've got access to capital programs. We need to double down on some of this. I was talking with a county commissioner recently and asked him, what he thought about a couple of high-profile companies that had left the state. We'd just gotten the Dutch Brothers news and the Pacific Natural Foods news. And his answer was pretty good. He said, they're gone. Don't cry over it. Just focus on building the next Dutch Brothers and the next Pacific Natural Foods. I think that was a great answer. And that's what we're trying to do here. Again, this is a multi-agency effort, and the Department of Agriculture has just started talking about some food innovation centers that they hope to stand up around the state to help promote entrepreneurship in that sector, in their wheelhouse. Next slide, please. The strategy also talks about workforce development and how we can improve that. You can see, for example, one of the specific strategies is that we should scale up things like the Future Ready Oregon program. This is, again, not an effort that Business Oregon will lead, but I think that this consortium and that the HEC more generally will have a lot to say here. Next slide. Infrastructure, the big one there for me, the two things that I'm most excited about on this one are increasing the supply of development-ready land and strengthening energy infrastructure, specifically electricity. We work on inbound recruitments quite often. Many of these are companies looking for large lot industrial sites that just don't exist in Oregon right now. And they need certainty around electricity supply. How long will it take to get the amount of electricity they want on that site? And we don't know increasingly, the utilities don't know. The pace of these large industrial projects, from data centers to manufacturing, is incredible, and it's put a real strain on the electrical grid and on land availability. So I'm excited to see state leadership turning some attention to these two issues, and hope that we can make some progress on it. Sector alignment is the next slide, please. This is talking about how we can target some industries and clusters that have potential for strong growth in Oregon. We had a good example of this a couple of years ago with the CHIPS investment. And this was a comprehensive investment in one sector. We saw alignment of resources across several dimensions, from direct business investments to workforce development investments, some help on land readiness, a research and development tax credit, even some childcare support, all for that one industry. I don't know that anyone's proposing anything on that scale for another industry necessarily, but what successes can we find from things like that CHIPS Act? How can we replicate it with some of the other industries around the state that have a lot of growth potential? Food and beverage is one that comes to mind in my part of the state. There's just a ton of entrepreneurship in that sector here, and a lot of it has real potential to scale. Next slide, please. And then recruitment, perhaps one of the sexier things at Business Oregon is trying to land a large traded sector recruitment from out of state. This is hard work. You swing at a lot of these recruitments, and it takes a long time to win on any of them. It's really hard. And I think that if all of the things on the prior slides were squared away and addressed, if we had those large industrial sites, if we had that energy infrastructure, if we had the strong workforce development programs, recruitment would be easy, right? So hopefully all these, each of these areas are going to play against one another. But some of the nuts and bolts of business recruitment are, you need to get in front of companies that might potentially have an interest here. We've done recruitment in a reactive way for a long time. Acme Corporation calls and says, we're looking for a West Coast site, Oregon, what do you have to offer? What we see with other states, and what we talked about in that business retention study a few slides back, was that other states are making proactive recruitment efforts. They are poaching our companies. And I heard that recently. I had a meeting with ADEC up in Newburgh, and the CEO told me, yeah, he gets those calls regularly. He's not going anywhere. He's Oregonian, and this is an Oregon company, but he gets those calls every few months from some state that wants to fly him out to look at some free land, to talk about a tax abatement, to see if he can relocate. So we need to do some of that ourselves. We need to be figuring out what kinds of companies we want to recruit to Oregon, what kinds of companies might be a good fit for this state, and how can we proactively get out and get in front of them. And part of that's going to include trade missions overseas. We had a pretty successful one that the governor followed us along on to Japan and South Korea late last year. Got some good leads out of that. How can we do more of that, and how can we be more strategic about it? So the next slide, please. The 2 slides ahead, please. The next step is to begin filling out this strategic plan, begin adding some meat on those bones. These are some of the partners that are going to be involved in this. We've got an external advisory committee that's going to be advising Business Oregon on this. We've got other state agencies on a separate committee that's going to be filling out the parts of this that Business Oregon won't lead. Please go to our website and provide your feedback as well. So if you scroll down to the bottom of the webpage there, you'll see the share your feedback button, and we want you to do that. This is happening quickly. It's coming together quickly, and without good feedback, it'll be a wasted effort. So please engage. There will be other opportunities to engage beyond just that survey, but start there, please. Tell us what you think. Tell us what we're missing and what needs to be better. And then next slide, please. Please do follow the legislative session as well. So the governor's bill for this session is House Bill 4084. This bill would make changes to the enterprise zone program, It would devote $40 million to industrial site readiness activities, helping cities put in the infrastructure, I guess, that industrial sites need, and implement some permitting reforms, specifically that fast track program. I can't advocate for bills other than the ones that the governor has put her stamp on. But I would encourage you all to also look at Senate Bill 1512. This is not the governor's bill, but it's a similar effort that again makes changes to the enterprise zone program, calls out the Prosperity 10,000 initiative as well for some additional funding. So take a look at those two bills and follow them along through the session and advocate for them or against them as you see fit. But those are the two I think that for this session are the ones to watch. So I'm going to pause there and see if anybody has any questions or if anybody wants to fill in anything that I've missed here. Quiet group. Thank you, Kyle. Well, when the session ends, we'll have some more clarity around this. We'll probably have a fuller draft of the strategic plan. We'll have a little bit more to share. But follow along and please do provide your 2 cents in the survey response form at the bottom of the draft. Thanks, everybody.
Arthur, thank you so much for bringing this in and sharing the links in the chat. If any questions come up, if folks have questions that they think of, Arthur, you'll be here for the remainder of the meeting. So you can add those to the chat.
Yes,
and thank you very much. With that, we will get a little bit longer break. So we want to come back at 10:55 and we will start off with a WTDB update. So thank you. Okay, that was a quick break. Hopefully everyone is back and online. Our next agenda item is the WTDB. We have some folks coming in to give an update on their work and focus specifically on the Oregon employability skills, as this came up in several of the previous consortium conversations. So with that, I will turn this over to Todd, Skip, Charlie, and Sherry.
Thanks so much, Diane. Good morning, everybody. Todd Nell, Director of the Workforce and Talent Development Board, which is the state workforce board in Oregon. We believe that WTDB is a team sport. So again, as Diane just mentioned, I'm joined by Skip Newberry, Charlie Hopewell, and Sherry Clark this morning. We're going to talk a bit about the WTDB, one of our more successful subcommittees, and then, as Diane just shared, dive deeper into employability skills. Next slide, please, Ronan. So at a high level, as many of you know, the State Workforce Board advises the governor on many different components of the workforce system, including plans, policies, and strategies. The board provides vision and leadership along with innovation. Thirdly, the WTDB strives to improve value for our customers, solutions, and drive system alignment. And last, and a critical component of the WTDB's work is around accountability and continuous improvement. So with that, I'll toss it over to Skip Newberry.
Thanks, Todd. So there's definitely lots of uncertainty in the hiring market right now, and just high level, wanted to share a little bit about some of what we're seeing in the tech sector, and then I'll get into WTDB specific expectations for this year and in the coming years. And with regard to the uncertainty of the hiring market right now, we're seeing a lot and hearing a lot from execs that are saying that they're cutting staff to get leaner ahead of becoming AI-centric organizations. But some of the companies that did this in the last couple of years, and I'm speaking more nationally, have ended up hiring back more people than they laid off initially. So it's a bit of a mixed and sort of uncertain situation that I think people are trying to get a better handle on. In the tech sector, last month in particular, we saw a bunch of layoffs from some of the bigger tech companies, again, continuing a trend from last year. And although they pointed to continued hiring in other areas, most of the positions across roles, functions that they are hiring for require a fair amount of AI experience and familiarity. And that's been a trend that we've seen continue last year and is continuing heading into this year. There also continues to be a big disconnect between execs and their employees about just how useful and productive AI is. There's been a bunch of studies released recently. This points to a big opportunity for companies to focus on designing new workflows, systems, and processes, and not just saying go ahead and implement AI without regard to what their employees need from a reskilling and upskilling standpoint. So that's something that we're going to continue to watch. I highlighted on this slide a couple of different events and opportunities to kind of dive deeper into some of these trends and topics that'll be scheduled over the course of the coming months. If anyone has questions about any of these events, please definitely let me know. I also wanted to point out a May 19th Oregon Talent Summit in Salem. If that's not already on people's radar, definitely encourage you to add it. And then in July, we're going to be doing another AI Data Center and Energy Innovation Summit. This is through TAO in Bend, and we're going to add a workforce track this year on that front, tackling more AI and infrastructure related job opportunities. We go to the next slide. Just wanted to talk a little bit about with the new chair in place, Ben Catt at the WTDB. He's really focused on leaning into and embracing the WTDB's role as a unified workforce system convener. And we've also been trying to focus on leading efforts on talent pipeline alignment based on industry demand. So this includes things like a greater focus on leveraging data collected by the state to show benchmarking and trends, and also looking for ways to incorporate more real-time input directly from employers. So we'll be looking at also activating legislative partnerships more and increasing engagement with the governor's office. And then another key priority of the WTDB continues to be looking for better ways to work together with the Manufacturing Consortium, as well as technology and healthcare consortia. And this might include convening more ad hoc industry groups, kind of a just-in-time approach where we're not asking too much in terms of a time commitment from industry representatives. And so we can quickly have them react to or provide input on single critical issues and not require too much in the way of a time commitment. I'm also mentioning that I'll be working with Julie and Lumina Foundation on an update for Oregon's post-secondary attainment goals. And the economic justification for post-secondary education remains strong. The last meeting, we heard that about 130,000 is needed for a family of 4 in Oregon to meet basic needs. And even for individual earners of around 65 to 70K a year, nearly all those jobs require post-secondary education. And in terms of where we're focusing priority-wise, again, during a poll in the last meeting, there was a large consensus around leveraging post-secondary attainment to shape Oregon's future economy. So what we've heard earlier with the Prosperity Council work and aligning workforce with economic development priorities is something that came through loud and clear, even in the education attainment goal conversation. Another priority is increasing economic mobility for Oregonians and finally reducing post-secondary attainment gaps. And with that, I think next up is Charlie.
Thanks, Skip, and thank you everybody for this opportunity. As we started the meeting today, we were talking about how collaboration makes a difference. And quite frankly, this Workforce Readiness Committee, which is a subcommittee of the WTDB, I think has been a wonderful example where we basically took a basic problem, which is foundational learning, that is not embedded into our educational systems and either primary, secondary, or post-secondary or higher ed, or how they align with necessarily industry. So our goal was really to find a way to leverage an opportunity. And this is a kind of a new activity for the Workforce Talent and Development Board. We took it on as an action to be a collaborator, using really the talents and efforts of the agencies and so forth to put together a program. We had an amazing rubric to start with, and Sherry Clark is going to talk to you all about that in a little bit in just a moment. But that rubric also ended up expanding, and I'll talk about that here in just a second. But why Oregon employability skills? The primary piece and the reason that we did this, and it was particularly relevant with the manufacturing community, is we continued to hear through survey after survey at a national, regional, statewide level, if I just have an employee that is engaged in the process and has the basic skills, which oftentimes people call them soft skills, if I just had that to work with, I as a business could get that person trained, up and running, and they could be successful in our business. That's really what Oregon Employability Skills is really all about. It's setting those foundational skills with intentionality, curriculum, and the opportunity to be able to leverage those through the entire pipeline using a common language. And I think that's very critical, and it gets back to the best practice piece. We really have to stop talking in two different languages between education and industry. So as we're working through and moving forward, Sherry will tell you a little bit more, actually a lot more, and Beth, about those skill sets. But the other part of the Workforce Readiness Committee, although we had really focused on the employability skills, there were other elements that were starting to get mixed into the conversation enough that, we felt a specific targeted approach in each of those is also warranted. So we are trying to push and drive a greater degree of STEM interactivity with the budget cuts and so forth that we are all facing as we look forward. CTE and STEM are two critical educational items, particularly for the manufacturing sector, that could dramatically be impacted by the budget cuts that are being proposed. So we're going to take an active look at the WTDB to see what ways can we impact those. Brings me to my final point. What's next? The biggest thing for us, the work we've done today has been luckily baseline supported very, very much so by ODE. That's been fabulous, but we are an initiative now that is being broadly distributed through both post-secondary, secondary, and primary education. And we still don't have a home. We don't have a financial home. So we really need to continue to drive that forward. So to really talk about what is OES and what does it mean for the manufacturing community, I'd like to turn it over to Sherry Clark and Beth Wiggum.
All right, thank you. I believe we should be on the next slide. And then I think, unless you guys embedded it, you have to hit the Oregon Employability Skills down there. I think it's a secondary link. Is it getting there?
Sherry, it doesn't look like it's popping up. Can you just share your screen?
I sure can. Yeah.
We were working on it. It didn't pull up. Sorry.
Okay. It's okay. These things happen. There we go. I'll pull it up and start the slideshow. Might be easier anyway. All right, let me get it on slideshow here. And I am Sherry Clark, and I am the Chief Architect of Oregon Employability Skills. I do also work part-time at the Oregon Department of Education and Career Connected Learning as a coordinator there. And as you saw on the first slide, I also am a professor at Chemeketa, so that was on there as well. And I'm going to turn it over to Beth for just a second so she can introduce herself as well.
Yeah, hello everyone. I am Dr. Beth Wiggum. I work at ODE, and my position supports career and college readiness and school counseling programs. And like Sherry said, we now have her at ODE, so very fortunate to be able to partner even closer with her and do more of the Oregon employability skills that you'll be able to hear about.
All right, so we're going to give you just a little highlight, just a few slides on the Work Readiness Committee, and I'll move pretty quickly because I think Charlie did a wonderful job of sharing this, but we do have a really big, bold goal, and that's moving Oregon into the top 10 states for workforce quality by aligning education and industry needs.
So the Workforce Readiness Committee has really been able to turn a point with our strategic work. So we've been able to move beyond traditional boundaries to, as you heard just a few minutes ago, to be able to reach a larger workforce system approach through this work. So it's more than just cooperation. It's really about integration. And so that is a lot of the work that we're doing. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we're bridging the gap between K-12 and workforce by intentionally disrupting some of our outdated silos that we have, our outdated models, And then also by building some active partnerships. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, how that's happening across education, industry, workforce boards, community sectors, to really build that unified front and provide more clarity and expanded opportunities for Oregon's future talent. So, and then we'll talk a little bit about some different projects that we have done and the return on investment and how we're getting better together.
Right. So the 4 initiatives that we do focus on in the Workforce Readiness Committee is Oregon Employability Skills, STEM, LIFT, CTE, and dual credit. So those are the 4 things that we look at, but we look at them across the partnerships, even into our community-based organizations, our local workforce boards, industry. We look at them just really building those strong partnerships, and we do believe that the ROI is better by working together than in silos.
Yeah, so to sustain this momentum, we're really seeing that we need to address 2 critical challenges. So the first one is that we lack a unified system to be able to track learner progress and progression through K-12 into the workforce. So that's something that we've been talking about for years, and hopefully we'll be able to eventually get to. In our document to our report, we talk a bit about that. And then the second part is around, we believe there's an opportunity to move from like that fragmented work that's happening, that siloed work, to more of like a braided funding type of model across sector. And so we do provide some recommendations around establishing an education and workforce talent coordinator, which would be able to help provide that coordination and governance that is needed across some agencies and industries to be able to do this work well.
All right. And we ended our final message on that report and just saying that Oregon can afford to have incremental progress, that the path forward requires a synchronized approach, and that we're really looking for a world-class, ready, and learner-centered approach to the things that we're doing. The full report is available on the Workforce and Talent Development Board website, and we hope that you will all get a chance to go through it and provide your comments. I'm going to go into Oregon employability skills right now, and I want to start just by reminding everyone what those 21st century skills are. Real quickly, where did they come from? They were vetted by JP Morgan Chase. They spent $350 million looking at what was needed across the United States. And then our Workforce and Talent Development Board did a survey with folks here in Oregon, and we really came out with that this really was a strong foundation and a place to start, and it would create a nice foundation for our students moving forward. I want to remind you that what are we doing with Oregon employability skills in the schools? We are defining those skills. We're teaching them through a very explicit and structured approach. We are helping the students to practice those, to tell the story. That storytelling is kind of the owning of the story. And I tell my students that when your amygdala gets stuck because you're so nervous, you're going to be able to lead from your heart because you know the story so well. We assess and then we certify the work that the students are doing. But I want to be clear that this goes all the way into our e-learning version for adults and can be done by anyone. It is completely free and open access. Here's one of the most exciting things. I'm going to turn it over to Beth to tell you about it.
Yeah, thank you, Sherry. I'm really excited about this. So what we were able to do is, so in 2023, Senate Bill 3 passed. And so it made high school students it's requiring 2 additional courses for high school students. So they'll all need to take personal finance and then higher education and career path skills. And so what we have done strategically is we've been able to embed Oregon employability skills across both of these new content areas that students will need to get, but have specifically called out in the higher education and career path skills. There's a standard where students will have to meet all of the employability skills. So all 10 of those that the Oregon employability skills lists. So, so this is now going to be a mandatory graduation requirement for students that are graduating on or after January 1st of 2027. So districts are going to start to be implementing that for students. And yeah, so really excited about it. So just know that it's not a checklist. It's about being really intentional, really strategic about how do we help build those human skills, you know, everything from communication to resilience, that really help create kind of like an equalizer for our learners. And then really this is to support to support this. So we are trying to do more cross-sector specific skill pagers that are, you know, that can be grab and go, really easy to use in different sectors. Also to ensure educators and employers are really speaking that same language, so that there's a lot in there around creating that common language, common understanding. I'll hand it back to Sherry.
Thank you, Beth. So I'm going to move pretty quickly right here and show you something that we've just added into our workforce development toolkit, because what we just heard was what's happening in K-12, but how can other people get involved? And so I put these slides in here so that you can literally come back and find your way through the breadcrumbs to where you need to go. But if you go into the users and you hit the workforce development tab right here, it's going to take you into workforce development. You're going to hit materials, and inside there, you're going to see the OES manufacturing single pagers, and then you're going to open it up and it's going to look just like this. And from there, you're going to see these two products. You're going to see the one pagers and the posters. So voila, here they are. And the posters are designed for manufacturing. We met with a number of folks across the state. And when we were designing these, I found out something very similar across sectors. And that was they really wanted a broad spectrum of the work that's being done, because as you all know, manufacturing as well as any other sector is not just one thing. So we looked at this from covering things from food to apparel, computers, fabrication. We just tried to really do some broad language around it. The document on the left is truly a one-pager, and it has the pictures over here on the left, and it can be printed out. It can be put in a workroom. It can be used in a toolbox talk or a staff meeting to just orient people into the skills. I'm going to move into this one here, and I always clarify it because it is a one-pager, but you have to print it front and back because there are two traits on each side of this page. And I'm going to go into this one, and I'm going to have Beth simulate how in 1 minute you can bring someone into this conversation.
And I just want to say, I'm sorry, you guys are just about, I mean, you are out of time. If you can wrap this up in the next 30 seconds, that would be great.
All right.
And then if you have questions, we can have them in the chat and answer them that way, if that's okay.
Yep.
Sherry, do you want to go ahead and just wrap us up for this bit?
Okay, so this document just has the trait followed by 5 bullet points that exemplify it. Trait 2, same thing, trait 3, and trait 4, and then it goes on to the others. And so it can be used really, really quickly by just naming the traits and one of the skills, and you can use it in a meeting to bring people into the conversation. And so that's something you can use even now. Our next slide just talks a little bit about how you can use organ employability skills, but it's in the deck, so you all should be able to get there.
Sherry and the rest of the WTD members, thank you so much. This is really useful information, and I really wanted to make sure that the consortium members understood all of the great work that was going on with the organ employability skills. Definitely top of mind from the meetings that I've watched. I've only been here a quarter, so I haven't been in those conversations, but certainly have listened to them and read it through a minute. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, we're going to pivot over to the strategic work plan. And I wanted to walk through the methodology a little bit before reviewing just a few key points on the strategic work plan. And then we will move into some small group for some discussion and input. So the strategic work plan for the consortium is complementary to both the HEC and the WTDB strategic plans. We are not duplicating efforts with the work that's being done in those groups, but we are complementing them. It was informed by both the Q425 consortium meeting, small group discussions, and member feedback that I've gathered through one-on-ones with most of you. And then it was also grounded by statute and the consortia purpose and charter. The one thing that is unique to me being in this role is it's using an industrial engineering approach. So you will see that in some of the key items. The HEC equity lens is foundational to all of the consortium work, so it's not called out specifically. And the work plan is intended to give the consortium the tools to really prioritize work and drive results in this post-future ready Oregon funding environment. So that's kind of the thought process around how it was put together. And if we can go to the next slide. I'm not going to walk through all of this. Hopefully you had some time to review this either outside the meeting, or you can read through it in the small groups. But I wanted to call out just a few items on each of the goals. So on number one, I referenced the post-meeting survey previously. That will help us set a baseline for and improvement goals. And that's what that first item is under the strengthen consortia engagement and knowledge sharing. So at the end of the meeting, it's a very quick scoring of each of the agenda items and then some additional feedback. So that will help inform our baseline. Under goal number 2, think about credentials that may feed the identification of those 1 to 3 priority credentials mentioned in the first work plan item under number 2. This will be your homework later on that I referenced, and we will also report this out to the HEC later this year. These also could be items that benefit from Workforce Pell, so tying that back to Julia's presentation earlier today. Now, number 3 is a bit of a mouthful. Diagnose and improve the operationalization of the manufacturing workforce development systems. These are really foundational to move the systems forward, and they're added for 2 reasons. First, when I was meeting with members one-on-one, several items came up where people mentioned, I don't know how to fill in the blank. There were multiple ways where it was hard to, they didn't know how to navigate the complexity of the systems that we're talking about here. And so really using, we are a manufacturing consortium, so using some of the tools used in manufacturing industry, which is where I come from, benchmarking and an as-is system map will help us drive improvement. So number 3, that's where that comes from. And then under number 4, the WTDB's talent assessment publication and the talent summit will be happening in May. This will give us some fresh findings, and so it made sense to really develop a response to new information that's coming out shortly. We've seen a lot of change in Oregon over the last year, so having that fresh information to kind of inform our work, I thought was beneficial. So the other thing to note, the consortium role is called out for each of these items: inform, convene, and collaborate or validate by the symbols next to the items. And so we're going to now move into small work groups. ELT will be the facilitator. There's also someone who will be taking the notes. We will be returning to the larger group about 11:47. And then we'll have some debrief about 3 to 5 minutes each. And then as I go through as I cycle through the small groups, if we need more time, we'll see if we can adjust that. But with that, you're all going to get pulled into a small group, and the questions were sent out ahead of time, and we can put that link in the chat as well in just a minute. So you should get pulled in just a second. Okay, everyone should be back to the main room now. Thank you so much. I popped around between the rooms and heard some good conversation and good input that's being provided. Do I have a team that would like to volunteer to go first? Kind of share your main themes and primary input.
Sure, Arthur and I will go first since part of our team had to drop off. So, okay, so we didn't really have a lot of feedback for questions 1 and 2 in terms of, what was missing. We thought that was a pretty good list and didn't really see anything that needed to be pushed out. But we did have some feedback on the rest, and in particular, when it comes to any concerns on the grounding, the longer term work, on the process mapping, benchmarking, etc. Travis from the school district really had some strong opinions from the K through 12 level in that, the wage and occupation profiles are great, and partnering with local industry, we need that. But what they need are metrics, right? And so how the metrics I think are really going to be key in terms of helping the school districts driving the students in the right direction. So that was one that they have some concerns about would be really helpful to see that. Also, we talked about that, mapping the system is a challenge in the past just due to so many different players, right? And so many redundancies in what people are doing in silos that have not totally been addressed. And even questions like, well, gosh, what's the difference between Business Oregon and the Oregon Business Council and things like that are not always totally clear and definitely not to lay people, and even folks like us that are not really lay people, and it's can be a little bit convoluted and confusing. Moving on to, how should the strategic plan be prioritized? We do think a metrics approach should be stressed. And one suggestion in terms of even a process angle on that is, Future Ready Oregon's Manufacturing Consortium should be driving the local workforce development boards. And so one question we had, or just food for thought, is how do the local workforce development boards necessarily respond to the plans and activities of this consortium, or do they have any obligation to do so? So that was just a thought we had. And then in terms of things that we felt strongly about collaborating on, the inventory and mapping and who's doing what currently and how those are all interconnected is something that we think is a priority of our committee that we should be focusing on. Also, we love the priority credentials. That's something that we all agree is something that should be a major focus and worked on. And then, of course, just from, I think all groups would feel this way, but especially coming from the educational sector and the K through 12 sector, is again really stressing that employer engagement and how necessary that is to keep this ecosystem going and keeping the very beginning of the ecosystem, which is the K through 12 system, making sure that they're responding to the needs of industry timely.
Outstanding summary, Carly. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Who would like to go next?
I can take a crack at it. So Lainey, I think, is going to share kind of our notes. So I'll try not to just read them, but I think thematically, what this actually echoes some of what Carly just said, but from a slightly different angle, that through the 3 years or whatever of this process with this consortium, we've got all this incredible data collection, results, analysis, networking and connectedness among, entities and people who probably never would have connected before. How do we capture and push that out to a broader constituency? I mean, all of us have, some constituency, but how can we be more deliberate about taking that information and really making sure it gets pushed out to those who would benefit most from it? And part of that is, yes, I mean, even just this morning, right? Just tons of studies and websites and different, governmental and non-governmental organizations. And how do we curate that information in a way that makes it accessible and usable? So to me, we've done the homework. So how do we kind of, get the credit for it outside of our group? Number 2, there's some question around the number 2 on the, I'm going back to the the goal or the strategic goal of knowledge sharing is sort of how much influence or control we have over what partners do or recipients do, and kind of what's the scale that's realistic to expect, and how directed should that be. So it's not a very eloquent summary of that point, but again, kind of thematically. And then in turn, kind of 2 points on the long term. So one would be, realize, I mean, we all are in a place where we know what our demographics look like going forward for the next however many decades, that we have no population growth, unless, policies around immigration change. But that coupled with automation, AI and other factors that are going to impact the workforce, and again, this is embedded in a lot of the work. I mean, it's right in the foundational kind of definition of what we're about, but just that kind of retention of jobs, the upskilling, the helping, not necessarily create more headcount, but encourage a workforce that can meet those higher skill, higher pay kind of positions in an economy where we're just not going to have, there's just not going to be enough people. So growing the total number of jobs is really not the focus. And the entities that we, the mechanisms that are kind of rooted in the 50s and 60s of every grant is going to be based on how many jobs did it create, kind of thinking is just not, that's really not the relevant metric for us in the current situation and the one we can foresee. So I think that probably covers that. And then down to 4, just making sure that we're coordinated, in terms of prioritizing. There's different priority industries, is it Business Oregon? Is it the legislature? Is it governor's office? There's different kind of lists of priority parts of the sector. How do we engage in the conversation about where should our attention best be placed for that? And to be always thinking ahead, not necessarily bound by what's here now, but kind of what we hope for and what we see coming in the future. And then, yeah, I guess just the concern about scale. Dr. Cox talked about kind of the scale in terms of just number of jobs and that kind of thing, or number of placements. Are there levers that we're not seeing or not using the right way? I mean, what are there ways that we can address kind of the root cause of, I think, the scaling, which is maybe lower than some of us might have hoped for. And then we had some volunteers for sector-based collaboration on kind of those, again, key subsectors of the manufacturing community.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dave. So next group.
I'm happy to go next if that's okay. So for the first question on the short-term items, and this is where we spent a bulk of our time. There was a couple of themes. One was making sure that we're focusing on the impact of the implementing employers, as well as tracking information about the target populations, so that we're making sure that these businesses are growing and robust, so that when the people come to work there, they're going to be able to continue to have a job, and that opportunity will grow. Interesting discussion about when you happen to have a local workforce board that doesn't focus in your area, and in particular in Eastern Oregon, and manufacturing is not there. And when you have a manufacturing base that's producing agricultural goods, and yet if that local workforce board is a gatekeeper to grant opportunities, you're now not able to take advantage of those grants to assist your industry. So trying to find some way that you don't have to find a workaround, but have some other way of accessing things and knowledge about them, so that that focus doesn't prevent you from engaging meaningfully. That same issue also occurs when you're trying to focus on areas that are important to you. And that might be local government, might be cities. But for instance, one workforce board did not share information about what was happening to impact youth, but that was a priority interest for one of the folks that we had in our discussion. And if the Workforce Board is really, again, a gatekeeper of information or knowledge to some extent, how do you make sure that that kind of information is available and easy to access? And a lot of that, I think, is going to be finding a broader way of networking so that you're not dependent upon particular information silos to get that information. And then the final thing is dealing with knowledge about statewide initiatives, things like the 100% fish utilization or industrial symbiosis. When there are initiatives that are designed to grow industry, then how do we find a way to make sure that we're well informed of what's happening there, so when it comes to workforce development, we can engage in that? They've done that successfully on the coast, where they found out that all their fish was going away out of country to be processed because there wasn't processing capability in state. So they developed that capability in state, or developing it. But then you have to make sure that you have the training so that when they do develop that infrastructure, so it's kind of a two-handed issue. One, how do you get the money to develop the infrastructure to create the jobs that enable industry? And two, how do you get training for the people who need to fill those jobs to make that actually happen? We didn't really have anything for short-term things that should not be included, or any concerns about how we were granting the long-term work. When it came to prioritization, there was finding out a way for effective data sharing, so that, and of course, the biggest bugaboo, data consistency. How do you track data so that you can actually compare it equally from one collector to another? And then the other one, of course, was really focusing on aligning credentials and career pathways and industrial demand. And along with that is comparing the data of how industry is doing in other states, and making that an apples to apples comparison, because otherwise you're not going to be able to inform policy that will allow you to make your local industry resilient if you're only focusing on some things that are either overly beneficial in Oregon or not beneficial in Oregon. Unless you look at all of those factors, you're not going to be able to move those effectively to keep businesses here and attract businesses here. Did I miss anything, group?
Okay, thank you. Last group, please.
All right. I think this is me. So we kind of, and it was my responsibility, I kind of hijacked the first part of our conversation for number one, but I had something that we've talked about, and I think Dave mentioned this too towards the end of his comments, was we have talked about scaling and the potential of like scalability a few times today, and just like, what does that mean? And is there an opportunity for us to develop some kind of shared language around what are the organizational or environmental factors that impact, the ability to scale and serve folks properly? So I think as part of what maybe I wanted a little bit more from the presenter during the Future Ready portion is more like qualitative analysis around ability to effectively scale, was something that we discussed. And I'll just kind of go down the list here. Question 2, we just really liked the layout and the timestamps of the work plan as presented, so we didn't have any kind of substantive feedback around that. We like the strategic plan for number 2. This I'm just looking through our questions, and team, jump in here if I'm missing things. For number 5, we talked about a potential starting point for how to kind of potentially navigate the pathways and credential conversation. The state of Oregon is one of a handful of states that has kind of a menu list that's published and publicly available about what are the credentials that are approved by the Department of Ed to be embedded within a CTE program. And so having that list and having that available data, though I'm I don't think we necessarily have the outcomes data as like what credentials kids are earning, but we do have that list that's publicly posted about which ones can be embedded within a CTE program. So that might be just kind of an interesting jumping off point to kind of look at that approved menu that's published on the ODE website. We talked about registered apprenticeships, credentialing. And Christy, Kyle, I think we got a minute or two. Do you mind jumping in and just summarizing any of the important things I missed? Or Kathy as
I
well.
think you got it. Thank you for jumping in and doing that.
I don't think I did, but thank you, Kyle.
What? Yes, you did.
Okay, well, thank you all. I hope that I jumped from room to room. Seemed like you guys were all having great discussion, and I welcome any feedback. If you think of anything after you look at it, if you look at it again, or you think you should have said something, feel free to send that my way. What I will do with this is take all of this input and see what adjustments need to be made. And we will review it one more time in the next meeting and just kind of agree on that is what's informing our work for the short term. There's some long-term things in there that will also change our work. So it's not like a one and done type of strategic plan based on what we're putting on there. So again, thank you very much. Our last presenter today is Kyle Thomas, and he is going to give a HEC legislative update. Hang on. Oh, actually, I apologize. We just got a notification. He can't make it today, so we will not have a HEC legislative update. Apologies for that one. It is in the short session, so something it's not surprising, I guess. So anyway, for that, we will move into our wrap up and next steps, unless folks have any final comments on the strategic plan. Okay, so we will move into this. Oh.
Yeah, so I can just speak to this really quick. So really just wanted to take a chance, since we were all convened here together, just to see if anyone in the group had any, workforce development challenges or wins, or just anything at all that they wanted to share with the group that we haven't covered already today that you think could be helpful to our learning and the work that we're doing. And I can just even lead. I kind of came armed with just some examples in case nobody had anything, but I wanted to share that, our Future Ready Oregon programs that we're doing here in East County with, in partnership with Work Systems, Microchip, and On Semiconductor are going very well. We just recently started a new Elevate Careers cohort, which has been great. They started this week. We currently have a great incumbent worker training going on with our on-site mechatronics courses. We're teaching AC/DC theory to our incumbent workers free of charge to the employees, which has been a fantastic program. And we're launching another course. Mount Hood was able to secure funding to secure a full-time instructor. So we have another course opening up, which is pneumatics in the spring. So again, it's just proof that these programs really are working and are making a really big difference. Rebecca, please share.
One thing I wanted to share, maybe not exclusive to manufacturing, but I think helpful on the workforce development side. So at OSU, at our Cascades campus, actually in Central Oregon, we are a part of a national accelerator program focused on work integrated learning. So that's actually with Arizona State University is the lead. We were one of 8 institutions selected nationally to participate in that accelerator. The expectation of that particular program is that this, over the next couple of terms, we will develop a pilot where we integrate work integrated learning experiences into the curricular education. So a lot of work integrated learning activities happen through things like internships or capstones, other things. And this program is an effort to try to further integrate those work integrated learning experiences into curriculum. So we're trying to do more matchmaking between across academic disciplines with employers to do more integration of those kind of project-based activities. So hopefully, as we continue that work, we'll have some things that we learn and best practices that we're happy to share with others as we develop it.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a great example. Anybody else have anything they want to share that's just been a really cool success or even a challenge? And while you're thinking of that, any other requests for topics, that you want us to talk about in another, in our next meeting? And again, you don't necessarily even have to answer now, but be thinking of that. So if there is something that you think would be really value adding to the agenda, let any of us know on the ELT or Diane, of course. We're happy to make sure that we get those addressed.
Well, Carly, thank you so much for facilitating that. We will keep this on the agenda. It was something that came up in one-on-ones that some folks were looking for that, to hear just more interaction between the consortium members. So for next steps for our meeting, the Q2 meeting will be an in-person hybrid meeting. The location is still TBD, but in the Portland-Salem area for that one, we are looking at Q3 as a travel meeting outside of the I-5 corridor. So that's next. Of course, we'll have another iteration of the 2026-2028 strategic work plan. That will be in our next meeting that we'll talk about. As I mentioned a couple times, there's a survey I'm going to ask you to fill out. This gives us the kind of Consortia baseline scoring, how effective were these, agenda items, and the messaging. And you can provide specifics and comments there if you like as well, and we can help make sure that we're hitting the mark as these presentations come into the meeting. And then we will review the credential homework that I am assigning to everyone on the next page. So if we can go to the next page. So for this one, it's really hopefully simple, and it's due no later than March 4th. So give you a month, but hopefully you can respond quickly. But if you can, send me, a recommendation if you have any credentials that you think should be our priorities from the manufacturing side. If you can send me 1 to 3 of those priority credentials, and it doesn't have to be something that fits Workforce Pell, by the way. It can be anything, but anything that needs to be created, modified, or expanded. We will talk about that in our Q2 meeting, and that's something that we will be reporting out through the HEC later on this year. So that's the homework. And with that, I just want to thank everyone for taking so much time out of your very busy day to attend. I know it was a long haul walking through all of the presentations before we got to the interactive part, so I really appreciate it. Want to thank my, all the members, the ELT, my HEC colleagues that provided input, engagement, facilitation, and support for my first meeting. I was not expecting to facilitate the first meeting 3 months into the role, so I had a lot of support for that. And then a special shout out to Ronan, who has been doing all of the meeting support behind me and making sure that the technology isn't having challenges. So with that, the meeting is adjourned. So thank you.